Somehow I don't believe you.
They don't. They don't.
Why don't we go around and
And that's
just
not a
ask
challenge.
everybody's name? It's just to start.
Well, you find a Marine that hasn't anything to say, you're in trouble.
What is that thing?
That's a microphone.
That's what I was afraid of.
Did you all go to play last
So
night?
be careful what you say.
Did you go to play last night?
Wally, come on over here when you have a moment.
So about just to start on the left side.
See, there he's all duded up.
Alf, what is your name and where were you born?
My name is Les Strantman. I was born in Lockhart, Texas.
Where do you live now?
I live in Kailua, Hawaii. Aloha.
Next.
My name is Bill Cantrell, and I was born in Springfield, Missouri, and I've never had enough money to leave town. I still live in Springfield, Missouri.
My name is Sam Mantell, and I was born in Indianapolis, and I live in Cincinnati now.
You're supposed to give your name, rank, serial number.
Nothing else.
Nothing else?
Name and where you were born and where you live now.
You remember where you were born now?
Yeah, Walter Warren Weber. I was born in Pierce City, Missouri in 1920. What else did you want?
Where do you live now?
I live in Punta Gorda, Florida. I'm from, I lived most of my life in Muskogee, Oklahoma. But we moved from there to Florida. My wife died in, you want all that stuff? Sure. No?
Yeah, anything you
Oh.
want to tell us.
Well, I was just going to say my first wife died in '94, and my second wife and I have been living. We married in '95, and we live in Florida, in Punta Gorda. Can't think of anything
Vernon Peebles. Let's see, birth. I was born in Alton, Illinois. Now, I can tell you a few stories. No, I won't do that. In 1921, so I'm a youngster.
else. Yes, you are. Right. But that's all right. Go grow up.
Any day now.
So how many of you were in high school or college or prior to World War II?
I think most of us were probably in college a little bit, and then I got taken out at the end of the second year. They were glad to see me leave.
You know, one question that I think is a good question to ask is, what do you remember on December 7th, 1941? Where were you and what were you doing when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
I was playing tag football in the side yard of the Beta House in Oklahoma A&M in Stillwater, Oklahoma. And the guy leaned out the window and said, the Japs attacked Pearl Harbor. And everybody said, well, don't worry about it, the fleet will take care of them. And that's it. The other fleet will take care of them. What fleet? It was at the bottom of the water, of the ocean. I was at college in Harvard, and I was listening to Vladimir Horowitz play a piano concerto, along with a whole flock of other people, when they interrupted it, which angered me, until I found out what it was about. And we sat around the rest of the afternoon talking about what this meant. None of us had any idea what it meant.
I worked part-time at a clothing store in Springfield while I was in college, and it was before the days of transcriptions, and I had to do a radio spot live every Sunday after Drew Pearson, and I was at the radio station, and I had a girlfriend parked outside. Beautiful day in Springfield, warm, sunny, and while my spot was not quite due, but they broke in with this bulletin about Pearl Harbor, and I had the presence of mind to say, Marks will forego their commercial announcement so we won't miss a word of this momentous day. And I had a feeling my life was going to change pretty fast. And when I left the station, I said to my lady friend, I may be leaving soon. This may be your last chance if you want to make your move on me. And it didn't work then, and it's never worked since.
My experience at December the 7th, anticipating World War II, at that period, in that period of time, I was taking a flying course at Texas A&M, where I was a student in CPT, and I had been out flying on Sunday, December the 7th, and was hitchhiking back to the school campus when I overheard the radio in one of the campus dormitories announcing the attack on Pearl Harbor, and that's what I was doing on December the 7th.
It's getting heavy. I had been at the University of Illinois and was in an ROTC unit of cavalry. The last one they ever had, I think. Anyway, that day I was out riding horses. And I decided that if I was going to go to war, I didn't want to have to walk. So I joined the Navy, Marine Corps.
I have another question now. I'd like to ask, what made you decide to choose the marine aviation?
That's easy. That's easy. In 1939, Life magazine printed a full-page, double-page picture of the F-4U Corsair. I thought that was the sexiest aircraft on Earth, and made up my mind, if at all possible, to fly it. I had been at CPT training too. I had a license by that time, and my aim was at that airplane from the day one.
There was another ad in.
It was sexy. It was gorgeous.
There was another ad in, I think it's Saturday Evening Post or maybe later on in life, that said it's yours when you win your Navy Wings of Gold. Do you remember that one?
No, I don't remember that one.
They were promoting the V5
So
program.
why did you decide to become a marine aviator?
Hell, I don't know. I thought it was. I just liked the idea better than Navy, being a Navy pilot and being on shipboard all the time.
Why not the Army Air Corps?
My brother was an Army Air Corps fighter pilot in England, and I didn't want the same routine he had.
Okay. Bill?
I liked that Marine dress blue uniform, and I had visions of me wearing that and escorting a model type young lady someplace. And I spent the whole war in Zelon flight suits or utilities, dungarees. And I've got a almost brand new set of dress blues I'd be glad to sell to anybody that has
They
them.
still fit?
No, they don't. That's why I sell them. But don't join the Marine Corps for the uniform unless you like utilities.
You tried it on Pearl Harbor Day, and then you tried it with dress blues, and you weren't successful either way, huh?
No. But
That's
I
the
never.
story of his life.
But there was a lot of talk about Sammy in these airplanes. I never thought of the F-4U as sexy. I thought it was a hell of an airplane, but there was nothing between us like that.
Val, how about
Well, when I was in flight school at Corpus Christi, they put me in the multi-engine training, which was the PBYs. And when I got commissioned, I thought the only way I could get out of PBY business was to get into the Marine Corps flying, which was not involved in air-sea rescue and stuff like that. So I opted for commission in the Marine Corps as a pilot.
You know, in basic training, you had to write a one-page letter stating which service you preferred. They didn't guarantee you'd get your preference. And I really wanted the Marine Corps, and I asked my I had a Marine instructor. I said, I really want in the Marine Corps. What do I say in that one-page letter? He said, the Marine Corps is big on tradition. You tell them your grandfather was a Marine and your father was a Marine. And I said, well, that's not true. Neither one of them were. He said, kid, there's a war on. They haven't got time to check up on these things. So that's what I wrote, and it worked.
They always told me that the Marines were in the upper 10% of the graduating class. I think that's a lot of baloney, but
It was true for a while, but
It
the Navy
was.
finally caught on. We were picking their pockets.
I heard that too, and for the same reason, I really aimed at the Marines.
well, it must
It's
have been,
nice to be surrounded by people who are good.
must have been when I went in, because it was doing that when you went in.
I was the only one out of my class.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's lucky.
Vern, why did you go into the Marines? Having been a cavalry ROTC?
Just lucky, I guess. But the reason I applied for membership in the Corps was because they had me flying OS-2Us. And I could vision myself being catapulted off these little cruisers and flying around in that. And I didn't care for that. So I applied for the Marine Corps. And they accepted me.
Good enough reason.
Now, 4 of you were on Peleliu. And maybe one thing I'd like to ask is, what is the most memorable event that you can think of happening on Peleliu? And that can be good or bad, whichever, kind of, what sticks in your mind as the most memorable event from your time on Peleliu? Val, how about, you want to start?
I think one of the things I remember most about there, I didn't get there the day of the landing, but walking around on the beaches or close to the beaches, you couldn't take a step without standing or stepping on shrapnel of some kind of other pieces of steel. They were just littered with shrapnel and stuff like that. And of course, flying, we were right there on the front lines. Practically, in the landing circle, we could carry bombs and drop them on the Japanese. That's about the best I can remember of that.
Well, we really did have a ringside seat, and I think a lot of us were very aware of the long line of stretcher bearers that were carrying young Marines out of the hills. And we weren't old, but we were probably 21 or 2 or 3, and a lot of these kids looked like they were 16 or 17. And we really welcomed the chance to get to fly some close air support, because those kids really took a pounding. And I've said it before, I don't believe the Pacific War could have been won without the Marine Corps. They're the one force that could take islands like Peleliu and Tarawa and Iwo Jima, because they're young men who won't quit. Some planner was conversing with a bunch of young Marines that just got out of boot camp, and he said that he'd been interested in Marine Corps philosophy, and somebody told him that the Marine Corps didn't try to teach political philosophies. It's no use confusing young people about this and that. He said the Marine Corps said, we don't teach you to die for your country, we teach you to help the other fellow die for his country. And they asked a young man just out of boot camp, said, how would you know who to kill? He said, I'll kill whoever my sergeant tells me to kill. And don't confuse them with ideologies. Just give them a rifle and point them the way you want to go. And there's a lot to that. But the thing they're taught most is that they're responsible for their buddy in the foxhole or the wingman who flies on them, and he's responsible to them. You take care of your buddy. And I think that goes a long ways.
That's really the reason I joined the Marine Corps, because you take care of the people around you, and they take care of you. I guess my most memorable event is when I wrecked his plane. I lost an engine on takeoff with a lot of bombs on board and got rid of the bombs and slid to a halt, 100 feet from a ditch?
Yeah.
Something like that, and wrecked his aircraft. He's never forgiven me.
Well, no, you saved your life. You did the right thing. But the people that put the left wing back on didn't trim it up properly. And I flew it a week later on a bombing hop and came in, and on the dive bombing run, the plane corkscrewed, and I hadn't told it to. And I asked Conger, my flight leader, to look me over. I thought I'd been hit. He couldn't find any holes, and I really didn't give it much thought. I should have. And we came in to land, and I was the fourth plane in, and we tried to put on a little Blue Angels type break-off and landing, and I started to roll out just before the wheels touched the ground, and it didn't roll out, and it went in on the left wing and nose. And I tell people sometimes when I've had drinks that I was the only survivor of a terrible crash, but I was the only person in the airplane. but I...
So it's Sam's fault that you crashed, is that right?
Really, well, he didn't rig the wing, and Cowboy Stout came to see me after they stitched my head up, and he asked me what happened, and I told him. And he thought a minute, and he wrote some things down. He said, "Cantrell, do you know how long it's going to take you to pay for that Corsair on a first lieutenant's pay?" And Conger went over to engineering and looked up the history and what had happened the week before, and the fact that the wing had not been rigged properly, or I'd have made the last payment about last April. That's true.
Thank you.
Wally, what's your most memorable event?
A 15-year-old kid. Walked in our.
That's okay.
I'm sorry, I can't tell it. He walked in our tent. He crawled out of his foxhole up on Bloody Nose Ridge, I guess it was. And he was scared to death. We gave him food and anything we had to, and talked to him. And he said he hated to go back, but he had to. And I don't know, do you remember that, Val?
I do.
And we asked him what he did at night, and he said he crawled down as deep as he could in the foxhole and pulled a poncho over him so they wouldn't find him. But I thought it was, pretty tough to send kids to war.
He lied about his age to get in the Marine Corps.
Yeah, he had to get in. I suppose they overlooked a few things too. They had to.
Remember the sergeant in the chow line who caught a bullet through the neck?
Gabby.
Gabby?
Gabby, yeah.
Yeah, I remember him.
He called him Gabby.
Yeah.
Called him Gabby because he talked
We
over.
were so close to the enemy that he was in the chow line with a tray in his hand, getting food, and a sniper hit him through the neck. It didn't hurt him seriously.
They put a Band-Aid on the front side
Yeah.
and a Band-Aid on the
The
back side, and
backside.
he never quit talking.
Gabby was a character.
I have another question. In Peleliu, they say that you flew, especially VMF 114, flew the shortest bombing missions of World War II. 1,100 yards. Did all of you fly on those missions?
Most of it.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
Well, it didn't take you long to get to work.
You didn't have to pick up your gear. You just took off, dropped, and
Circled and landed.
So, you mean you wouldn't raise your landing gear?
No.
You just leave it.
Just
all right.
drop it and come around.
Yeah, you wanted to be slow because you were trying to hit the mouth of caves. You were using, 4 to 5 second delay bombs?
Well, they tried everything.
Yeah.
They had us drop
Mostly.
napalm without
Yeah,
fuses,
yeah.
and then they'd fire it with mortars. They tried everything, and nothing worked too good because those caves were 5 stories deep in some cases, and they had baffle doors.
And you're trying to hit a hole that's maybe a yard across.
We told the Marines that the racks were not rigged for this. We couldn't precisely time the drop, you release the belly tank that it might. So they cleared a path going in and coming out of Marines so we wouldn't burn any of them by mistake.
They got very testy if we dropped short.
And a fellow named Reed, one of the pilots, had one hang up on him, and he dropped it down the reverse slope, and he knew he had dropped it where there were some Marines, and he came in and landed and jumped in the Jeep and raced around there, and he saw a burned out machine gun next to the road, and he stopped, and this grizzled old sergeant who was probably 19 came out of the bushes and said, Reed said, my bomb hung up, and I hope nobody was hurt. Oh, he said, no, we saw you. We got out of the way. He said, you just missed that cave about 6 feet. Now, you go up and try it again. We'll get out of the way. They're really pretty cool.
Well, talking about hanging up with those belly tanks hanging up, Nick Burgess, one of our boys from New Orleans, had one hang up, and we couldn't land because if it dropped off when you landed. They had a method of igniting them, which was a phosphorus grenade strapped to the tank, and then a wire ran to the plane to pull a pin. It was a little rough. It wasn't a real smooth operation. So he had to go out and bail out over the fleet, and they picked him up on a destroyer and brought him home. That's what you faced if you couldn't get rid of your belly tank.
Val, how about you? Shortest bombing raids in World War II.
Well, that was Peleliu, of course. There are lots of pictures of planes in the landing pattern, dropping the bomb, landing, loading up, same thing. I don't know whether, I'm sure we did any good. I understand there were Japanese soldiers that were left behind or were still there, that incidents of Japanese soldiers in the chow line, the Marine chow line, to get food. So.
Pete Hanson's just joined us. Pete,
Hello.
Start off and just tell us where you were born and why you joined the Marine Corps. Start with.
We got a lot of time.
It depends
I
on
was born in the Lake Merritt Hospital in Oakland, California, in the year 1921 on the 5th of December. I joined the Marine Corps because my high school and college buddy's father was in the Marine Corps, and he got me to going out to CPT when Roosevelt knew the war was coming. He started a thing called civilian pilot training, unless you've already all been through all that, so that he knew he'd have at least some fledgling pilots getting ready. And this was up in Ann Arbor, and so he said, come on, so we went out very early in the morning, learned to fly Cubs, and then December 5th hit, we both tore down and enlisted for the Naval Air Corps.
You mean on December 7th?
On December 7th,
Right.
yeah. And we hadn't finished our second year. We were just in the first, what would be semester. We had to finish through till June and have our second year of college before they could accept us. So we said okay, and we still signed up, and boy, as soon as that was done, we were off pre-flight school. And my buddy went with me. We were in the Wolverine Squadron. We were supposed to work together, train together, fly together, and go to the fleet together. And of course, once we left pre-flight school, we never saw one another again. That was the end of that. But in the meantime, he and I stuck together some way, got through, and he had said, my dad said, we got to be Marines. And so that's why I did it. And it's that simple. I'm a follower, not a leader.
And we were talking earlier, another question that we asked was, what was your most memorable event on Peleliu? What event, good or bad, do you remember the most? It's been all over the map.
Yeah, there are a number, 2 or 3. The one where I was in the most danger, that isn't really the most memorable, but it's pretty good. I had gone up and done what we did, a little strafing and dropping little 100-pound bombs on an outhouse or whatever it was. And the mech had said, stay up a while and run the gas out of the wing tanks. And I said, fine, because I don't think we had a gauge for the wing tanks. You just, the engine quit, then you knew you were out of gas in the wing tanks, and you'd switch the thing. Well, it was taking forever, and I was floating around, and I said, the heck with this. I've been up here long enough. I'd come back from Babbledop or wherever we did our thing, and came down, did our 114 pull streamers, and the end of the strip, dropped the gear, the flaps, chopped the throttle, turned, hit the runway, and the prop stopped cold. I mean, the moment the thing hit, bang, it stopped. And I just rolled out, and I said, well, good, we're down. But in 5 seconds earlier, just 5 seconds earlier, that would have been it. And in our little pyramidal tent that night, the mech came over and handed me this little slug, and he said, this was in your oil sump. It had gone through. And so the oil had been draining out of the aircraft for all the while I was fooling around, it just dripping away. And not being all that conscientious, I wasn't watching my oil gauge, or I might have noticed something. So the plane had just seized at that moment. And just 5-10 seconds earlier, I wouldn't be here. So you just say, hey, thank you.
Well, you got your slug on your earlier flight up to Battletop before you did this? Is that what?
Oh, sure, yeah. They, up on Babbletop, you didn't know who were shooting at you. If they had tracers, fine. But some guy in the jungle with a 22 or this was a 7.7. You could be being we were shot. We came home with holes all the time.
Never aware of it.
Never aware of it until you got back, because we'd be down looking for targets of random targets. Let's say something that one should shoot at. So you get shot at a lot and didn't know it.
When we got, of course, one thing they told us was that inverted gull wings were very distinctive, and your own troops could find easier to recognize than maybe a P-40 or a P-47, and so you wouldn't be in danger of friendly fire. And that's not true. The Seabees had a philosophy of shoot them all down and sort them out on the ground. and I know many cases of night flying where our friendly forces were bored and they'd shoot at planes going over. And,
You guys do a lot of night flying?
No.
well, in training you do. You're supposed to do so much per month, and we didn't do a lot. Not a lot in combat.
We did it, which I don't know how many. The squadron, formed at El Toro, went to Hawaii, and then we did a stint on Midway. And while we were on Midway, someone decided we ought to practice some night flying. And there are just little bitty lights there, and it's a coral strip, as I recall, and we had to, and it's blacker than hell, and occasionally you'd get the runway watch where you would be out with one of your enlisted personnel who had a Very pistol, and you're standing at the end of the runway, and all you can see is the exhaust flame of this big, ton heavy hunk of metal coming in, gung, 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 and going to beat heck, and you think, Judas Priest. And you were, if anything happened, it was your job, turn to the sergeant, whoever it was, and said, fire a Very pistol, so the next guy would not come in and land on some trouble that just occurred on the runway. Well, that scared the heck out of me. I watched our boys coming in and what looked like, this is very, very deadly. But when you're in the airplane, which you were next time you were doing it, it was a piece of cake and land. But on the ground it looked, pardon me, I went way off, didn't I?
We have plenty of time and plenty of film.
It was kind of exciting on Midway to pick up broadcasts from Tokyo Rose, and they had submarines laying off Midway all the time, and it was also a rest base for our submarines who were in the far western Pacific, and we had to get permission to fire on a submarine if we saw one, because it was hard to tell them apart. And the Tokyo Rose would say, for instance, well, you fellows in VMF 114, the CBs have got the crosswind runway open now, and we're watching you, and they talk about your girlfriends are dating the draft dodgers while you're out here on the wrong side of this war. And it was kind of interesting to know that they knew we were there.
It was, but the thing I never figured out, how she knew our squadron CO. She knew more things about us than we did. Where did she get that information?
I think from the FBI.
It's the Goonie Birds.
Oh, that.
Remember,
yeah.
they came over. They were probably.
I never figured it out how they
I
knew
never
so
had-
much about what we were.
I didn't know
what
how
we
she
were doing.
found out my girlfriend was going out with a draft dodger. How do you explain that?
It's automatic, isn't it?
It's a wild guess, and she hit it right.
I have another question, and that is.
Let's take a break and
okay.
change